So, Jason, when we first started the show, I had this idea. You've heard of good cop, bad cop. So let's put a little spin on it and call it good Cav, bad Cav. Same
All
premise.
right.
One of us will take the positive of the situation. One of us will take the negative of the situation. We'll start with the good Cav first, and then whoever's the bad Cav will respond. We'll go back and forth on a couple pressing topics we have from the first two games of the first round of the Eastern Conference playoff between the Cavaliers and the Magic. So the first prompt I'm going to put out there, Jason, then we'll spin the wheel of fate. Is the Cavaliers defense truly elite right now? And let's spin the wheel. And Jason, whatever it lands on, that's who you'll be. I'll take the opposite, okay? So question number one, is the Cavaliers defense right now truly elite? The wheel of fate says, Jason, for this topic, you are going to be the bad Cav, which makes me the good Cav. All right, guys.
I'm used to being the bad cop.
It's appropriate to start with you being the bad Cav here. All right, guys, let's start with the big picture. Orlando's offense in the regular season was solid. They weren't great by any metrics, but they were solid. They averaged 110 points per game. They shot 47.6% from the field. They shot 35.2% from the three-point line. And then you look at their playoff stats against the Cavs. That has fallen to 84.5 points per game. They're shooting just 34% from the floor. They're shooting 24% from beyond the arc. Jason, that is a 26-point-per-game difference from the regular season to the postseason. A 13.5% drop in field goal percentage. An 11.5% drop in three-point percentage. Granted, they have shot like absolute dog crap. They're 17-32 from three. They can't buy an open bucket. But I do think what the Cavs have done from a defensive schematic standpoint, which has allowed them to create some open shots. I think part of the strategy and the reason they're allowing these guys to be open is they are so compact, kind of like Virginia on the college ranks. They are playing, you're not going to beat us at the paint. If you're going to beat us from three, so be it. We don't think you can make those shots. But every time someone tries to get into the paint, whether it's Paolo, whether it's Franz, whether it's Suggs, there are two or three Cavs there in help position with a hand in a passing lane in the right help side position to create havoc and force Orlando to take an alternate route to their end goal. And for those reasons, the numbers speak for themselves, but it's more of the fact that Orlando is contested on every shot they seemingly want to take, and they get nothing easy from a play standpoint. They're not running anything that's generating good looks. All their open looks are from scrambles or off some sort of chaos or confusion on the back end for the Cavs. I think through two games, it is hard to ask for a better defensive performance than we've seen from the Cleveland Cavaliers through 96 minutes. I just think it's hard. 84.5 points per game, that's incredible.
Yeah, if you just go strictly on the numbers, of course you're going to come to that conclusion. And Jarrett and Evan inside are always great, right? And so it's easy. It's never easy in the NBA playoffs, but this is sort of an obvious, we're going to pack the paint and go ahead, shoot as much as you want. The Cavs have basically put all of their furniture in the paint. They've got the couch, the bed, the big screen TV. They are living in the paint defensively and giving Orlando whatever they want. This is not necessarily against the Cavs. This is not a knock against the Cavs. But I mentioned this on the show today. If you look at the NBA's tracking data, Orlando is, I think it's I don't want to give. I know the percentage is 25%. I
have it right here. What are you looking for, Jason?
Open shots 6 feet or more. When the nearest defender is at least 6 feet away. When the Cavs are defenders are when the shooters. Let me try that again. When Orlando's shooters are wide open. Yeah. So the Cavs' closest defender is more than 6 feet away. Orlando is shooting 25% on threes.
That's actually not even true. They're shooting 22% on threes.
Oh, that was 25.
Oh, no, you're right. You're right. So there's 22 attempts, 25%.
Okay, so 22 attempts. So then it's how many makes?
5.5 per game, 22 open looks.
All right, so 11 of 44 total in the series.
Yes.
So the Magic in the series have taken 44 shots in 2 games when the nearest defender is at least 6 feet away. 3-pointers. What does that tell you? So is that elite defense or is that just horrific shooting? So it's hard for me to say everything is fixed and the Cavs defense is elite when Orlando's shooting is just tragically awful. Like, think back to last year. So last year, we talked Cavs, shooting. They didn't have enough shooting. If you look at the Cavs metrics in that Knicks series, because I looked this up last night, on these same shots that we're talking about, these wide open shots with no defender within 6 feet, the Cavs shot 40%, 40%. Very respectable. That's sort of where it's supposed to be when you have looks that open. And yet we still said the Cavs had a terrible shooting series and they couldn't make shots from the outside and they didn't have enough shooting, all of which is true. So if the Cavs were at 40% on these wide open shots, that tells you how terrible the Magic have been, that they are 15 percentage points less, 25%. Now, there's a couple of teams right now underneath that 30% threshold, and maybe they'll come up as the series goes on. Indiana's down there, they're going to come up. But here's what's interesting. Over the last 10 years of tracking this data, only one franchise has ever finished a postseason shooting under 30% on these wide open shots. It was Donovan Mitchell's teams both times in Utah. I think it was 2019 and 2021, I think. And both times Utah was bounced in the first round because if you can't make wide open shots, you're not going to advance.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily that I would say the Cavs defense is not elite. We just need to see it against a competent offensive team that can balance the floor, that has capable shooting to complement its best player, because right now it's Paulo Banchero 1-on-5 at times, it feels like, because they're asking him to do so much because they have nothing around him in terms of shooting. If the Cavs put up these types of numbers against Boston in the next round, then we'll have the conversation the defense is elite. It's just hard for me to get to that point right now when Orlando is so overmatched and such a terrible perimeter team.
I think that's all fair. I also think you're discrediting some of the confusion the Cavs are causing Orlando when they're trying to get into their sets. I think it is a little bit of both, which has led to some open looks because they're so packed in. I think that's what they're allowing Orlando to take. So that's the first good Cav.
That's fair.
Second one, Jason. The Cavs have figured out how to play Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley together to maximize both their skills. We'll spin the wheel of fate, and we will see if you are the good Cav or the bad Cav on this one. Jason, the wheel of fate says you're the good Cav. Tell us why Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley all of a sudden work together like we had hoped they would.
Because Evan's three-point shot is coming around. And we saw it. I mean, we talked about it. The first 2 threes that he hit in 31 seconds changed everything in game one. And Mike, I know you and I talked about it a little bit after the game, and just the way that, JB talked about how Orlando had immediately after the second three, Jamal Mosley had to take a timeout, and they started changing their defensive coverages. JB mentioned Orlando went to 3 different coverages, and Mike is such a lunatic, he found all 3. And he sent me the third one yesterday of the 3 defensive mixes and defensive changes that they went against Mobley. The most obvious one was just switching and putting Evan on a small, and then he just went in the post and just ate guys up in the post. So when Evan is hitting his threes, and he doesn't have to, we're not talking 6 of 8, 4 of 7 in the game, just 2 or 3. We saw the impact, especially early. We saw the impact that 1 or 2 early threes can have on a playoff series. It causes everything to change. It spaces the floor better. It balances the floor better. Then when Evan does go inside, it creates more opportunities for him. I can't sit here with a straight face, even in the good cop role, and say everything is fixed and all is well. But we've seen since February more aggression, assertiveness on his end to take those. He wasn't even taking those shots. He's now taking them. Teams are going to continue to leave him open. They're going to leave him open until he proves that he can make a couple, and they're going to switch it up. It's the same way with Isaac Okoro, where teams are just leaving him wide open. You have to pick something to give up. Teams are looking at the percentages and saying, we don't trust those guys. That's what we're going to give up. And when Evan makes those shots and punishes the defense for that decision, then they very much do fit together on the floor.
Yeah, to take the role of bad Cav here, the reason it's working is Evan's 3 of 7 from 3. And when they left him open to start game 1, he buried the 2 threes to start that first half, which completely changed how Orlando decided to guard them. Now in game 2, they went back to the same strategy they started game 1 with, which was essentially leave Evan open and see if you can make shots. He did not make 2 threes in the first half. He went 1 of 4 in game 2. But the fact he is shooting those shots makes a difference. I was going through the tracking data, Jason, because I was curious, when those two are on the court, how is the Cavs' offensive rating compared to other 2-man combinations? And NBA.com does a good job of giving you exactly when player X and player Y are on the court together, what's their offensive rating, what's their defensive rating, and how does that compare to other 2-man pairings through 2 games in the playoffs. So of 2-man pairings who have played at least 5 minutes together, so small sample size to big sample size, but at least 5 minutes.
Okay.
When Mobley and Allen are on the court together, they have a offensive rating of 100. That is the 12th best on the Cavs, which is in the range of everyone else because all the offensive ratings are low.
Not great, not
but
terrible.
The reason I point out 100 as an offensive rating is that would be atrocious in the big picture of the NBA. If you look at the regular season, which granted, regular season, postseason, not the same. The best two-man ratings had offensive ratings, or the best two-man pairings had offensive ratings in the 130s. And then the good ones had 120.
That's higher than I would have guessed.
What'd you say?
That's higher than I would have guessed. I'd have thought 118 would have been elite. 118, 120.
Well, this is just for two-man pairings.
Right,
so
right.
As it gets bigger, they go down, but for two-man pairings. So we're talking, high 120s, high 110s. 100 is not a good two-person offensive rating. But granted, no one in this series has a good offensive rating because neither team's broken 100 in 2 games. So take that context into play. I just think this is a matchup that allows the Cavs to play both bigs rather than JB Bickerstaff and his staff finding something to unlock their full potential together. I think their success on the court together defensively is a testament to Orlando not being able to shoot. And if you're going to pack the defense in, you know who it's really hard to score against? Those 2 guys at the rim. That is a death sentence for the Orlando Magic, and they have done a horrific job finishing in close around the paint because of the forearms up there between Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley. And it's been great to watch because they've produced some fireworks, mainly when Evan's shooting threes, but I'm not ready to say that they found out the secret sauce to finally unlock this 2-big lineup and this combo. I think it's more a result of playing Orlando than anything else. All right, Jason, third, good Cav, bad Cav. Donovan Mitchell can be the best player in a playoff series, and Cleveland can advance. The wheel of fate will determine whether you are the good Cav or the bad Cav on this one, Jason. You never get 2 goods in a row. That's not your mantra. The wheel of fate says, F that, you are the good Cav again, Jason. Donovan Mitchell, the best player in the series. Is that sustainable for the Cavs?
It better be. I said earlier at the top, sort of flippantly, that I thought Jarrett's been the best player, and it stretches he has. But obviously, this team's going to go where Donovan takes him, and he has to be the best player, especially in a series like this where there's not a ton of offensive firepower on the other side. We've talked at length before about it's hard when your best player is a little guard. This is a league built on wings, on big wings who can dribble, pass, and shoot. And when you're a little guy, it's just hard to carry an entire franchise. But that's the position they're in. The Cavs are in right now. But they do have a lot of talent around him. But he's one that sets the tone. He sets the tone early in the games. First quarter, big 3 right out of the gate in game 1. Another big first quarter last night. He's shooting, I think, 70% for the series in first quarters, in the last 2 first quarters. And, that's something that Orlando is going to have to address. And we'll probably talk about that here in a minute of things that they can do to try and fix that. Because one thing that Jamal Mosley has talked about throughout the series is can't let them get off to fast starts. Well, Donovan is the one that's getting them off to fast starts. He's cooled a little bit, as the game went on, but those fast starts is really what's crippling Orlando. So, Donovan has to be the best player. And they're going to win this series. So there you go.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with your last point of he is the best player in this series and they're going to win this series. But big picture, as it stands right now, and I have to play the bad Cav for the sake of the game, outside of this series, I'm not sure he's the best player in any series against the other top 3 teams in the East. He's not better than Tatum. He's not better than Giannis if he's healthy. And the Brunson debate we can have, but after seeing what Brunson did in the playoffs last year versus what Donovan did, I'll hear both sides of that argument. Brunson has not played well in the first 2 games against Philly, but it's hard to erase what he did last season. The one thing we need to see more from Donovan, as good as he has played in these first 2 games, he needs to be more consistent from 3, shooting just 27.8% from the 3-point line in the first 2 games of this series. And while that's good, the Cavs need more. They haven't broken 100 yet, and they've struggled. Jason, in the second quarter in game 2, they had 28 points. In the second quarter last night, they had 20 points. They've scored 42 points in the 2 third quarters combined. That's not enough. They've gone off to these great starts. They had 33 in the first quarter in game 1. They had 30 last night in game 2. And then they've gone down consistently each game. Game 1, highest scoring quarter in quarter 1. They scored 20 points in quarter 2 and 20 points in quarter 3. Last night, 30, 28, 22, 16. They are able to get off to these hot starts because Donovan's been able to take over games early. But he only had 4 points in the entire second half last night, Jason, and it came on back-to-back possessions. So you look at all the possessions the Cavs had in the second half. Donovan, for as good as he played last night, was relatively a non-factor for everything out of a 2-minute stretch from a scoring standpoint. He does other things, but I do think if Donovan Mitchell is going to lead this Cavs team, not just past Orlando, which I think we expect him to do at this point, but past either a Boston or a Miami or to the Eastern Conference semifinals and finals, he has to play even better than he has to these first 2 games. And how he's played up to this point is enough to beat Orlando. I don't think it's enough to beat Boston or New York or Philadelphia or Milwaukee if that's the matchup. The good news, he's capable of playing better. He admitted it in the postgame last night. I know you stayed in the locker room, Jason. We went back to talk to Donovan, and he's the first to tell you, I got to find a way to replicate my first quarter in quarters 2, 3, and 4. I come out hot. I make it a priority to be aggressive to get my team off on the right foot, but I have to find a way to sustain that. It can't be a 12-minute burst and then me in and out of the offensive flow. I have to be better. And when your leader says that, it's easy for everyone else to buy into that mantra.
I wonder if that I'm just totally speculating and spitballing here. I wonder if the knee has anything to do with that, or if his wind. I know he was talking about, because normally this is not an issue for Donovan, where he's a first quarter player and then fades, right? Like that's never been his MO. But he said, if you go back toward the end of the regular season, the game when Darius hit the three to win, and I think it was that game. Yeah, I think it was that game where he just said, like you said, I was exhausted.
He told you he was gassed.
Yeah, he told me he was just flat out exhausted. So he was happy to see Darius take that shot because he didn't have anything left. And then they've had 10, 12 days off without a game since then. So I just, you wonder if he was gassed at the end of the regular season at the end of games, if because of the knee and because of how much time he missed, maybe his conditioning isn't quite where he's used to having it at this point in the season, or maybe the knee still hindrance. He's not going to admit it, even if it is the knee.
Yeah.
But that's just something that popped into my head as you were talking about that.
All right, last one here, Jason. Last good Cav, bad Cav. One more spin of the wheel. The statement is the Cavs are playing well offensively. Jason, will you be the good Cav or the bad Cav? 3 in a row would definitely break the system. So I'll know Jason rigged this if he gets good Cav again. And Jason's the bad Cav. Okay.
There we go.
All is right. Listen, bottom line, the Cavs have played okay offensively. They haven't played good enough. And I think I'll go with this. But here's what I want to point out. The point per game total is not the end all be all. You can generate good looks and you can miss shots. The Magic should be scoring more than 84 points a game. The Cavs should be scoring way more than 94.5 points per game. You go through that same tracking data, Jason. 50.3% of the Cavaliers' field goal attempts in this series have been considered either open or wide open, according to the NBA tracking data. That's within a defender 4 to 6 feet off or 6+. So 4 feet of separation between the shot and the defender. Half of their shots have been considered open. They're not shooting good enough on those shots. I got the numbers for you right here if you really want to know. On open shots this series, they're shooting, and this is crazy, I'm not kidding you, they're shooting 25% on mid-range shots with 4 to 6 people, and then 50%, on mid-range shots when they're wide open, and they're shooting 12.5% from 3 on regular open threes. They're 43% on wide open threes. So when you add those together, they are 16 of 54 from beyond the arc on open threes. It's not 17 of 72, but they're not shooting well enough. The good news is they're getting the shots they want. And unlike Orlando, Jason, where I think it's a byproduct of how Cleveland is guarding them, I think the Cavs have generated a ton of open looks and just haven't made them. Donovan Mitchell's only averaging 3.5 assists per game. If guys had made open corner threes, that number would be way higher. Jason, on open corner threes, the Cavs are 1 of 16 this series. 1 of 16.
Terrible.
That's not good enough. George Niang is 0 for 7. Max Strus is 2 for 10. These guys have to make those shots. So I do think the Cavs are generating plenty of looks that they would consider quality looks. They're just not converting them. So I do think the Cavs offense has played a little bit better than maybe the big picture has looked. They have to cut down on the turnovers. It's been far from perfect. But I look at the shot quality over the total point quantity, and I think the shot quality indicates they're getting some pretty good looks against a tough Magic defense.
You're a terrible good cop, because I think you just basically made my case of why they're struggling so badly on offense. They lead all playoff teams in turnovers per game right now, and obviously we still have tonight's games to go to get the rest of these series to a second game. But to this point, I think it's 16.5 turnovers a game that they're averaging, and it's not just the backcourt. Darius last night, 4 turnovers, 4 assists. That's not a good ratio, obviously, for your point guard. There's still times he's shooting it better. Darius is shooting it better, and JB's talked about he's really liked that he's stepping into those. Orlando's going underneath on the screens a lot of times. That means they're going behind the screener, and they're giving Darius that extra foot or so to shoot. And Mike, is better at explaining this than me, but you go underneath the screen to cut off the drive, but you leave open the 3-point shot. You're basically daring them to shoot when you do that. And Darius is shooting it well from 3 for the series. That's an encouraging sign. But it's some of the other parts of his game that still are hit and miss that need to come around. Donovan has to play better. We talked about it. He has to shoot it better. You mentioned Yang. He's 0 for 8 in these 2 games. And even because they're up 2-0 in the series, he was making fun of himself last night in the locker room. He was actually hysterical. He was saying, bang, bang, can't make a thing. And he said, if anybody's got the answer, I'd love to know it, because he just can't make a shot. And Max Strus, those were the 2 big free agent signings. Imagine if they were down 0-2 in the series, we would be destroying Strus and Yang and, these big key free agent acquisitions. And they aren't helping really at all on the offensive end. But Orlando's been so awful that it just goes unnoticed. You don't even notice it. Now, the good news is, obviously, this team is capable of playing much better than what they have on the offensive end. So that's the good news. If they clean up some of these turnovers, and some of that's a credit to Orlando. This is the way that they like to play. They're going to force turnovers. They're going to force you into bad shots. So not all of this is on the Cavs. The wide open looks, that's on the Cavs. That's just flat out missing point blank looks. But some of this other stuff that we're talking about, certainly you give Orlando some credit for that. But Boston's really good too, defensively. So if you want to look at the glass half empty, it's that this team ain't playing that well. And they're lucky to be playing an inferior opponent that's going through this for the first time. And if you want to look at the glass half full, it's, hey, this team ain't playing that well, and they got a lot of room to grow and some time to get there.